My wife and I almost didn't make it. Not because we didn't love each other. Not because of money problems or distance or anything dramatic like that. We almost didn't make it because of something so small, so ordinary, that I'm almost embarrassed to say it out loud, that we were arguing about dishes that I know. Dishes at IT was a Tuesday night. I'd had a brutal day at work. She'd had a brutal day at work. We were both exhausted, both running on fumes, and I walked into the kitchen and saw the sink full of plates she hadn't washed yet, and something inside me just snapped that I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I did something worse that I sighed. That long, slow, deliberate sigh that says everything without saying anything. The kind that lands like a verdict. And then I said, in this calm, measured, absolutely devastating tone, I just don't understand why this is so hard. She didn't respond. She just looked at me for a second, turned around, and walked to the bedroom. And I stood there thinking I'd won something that I hadn't won anything. I had just done the thing that I would later learn is the single most corrosive habit in long-term relationships. Not cheating, not lying, not the big dramatic blow-ups people write books about. Contempt. That sigh? That wasn't frustration. That was contempt. The subtle, quiet message that I was above this. That she had failed some standard I'd set. That I was the reasonable one. And she was the problem, that we spent 3 days barely speaking after that. Not because of the dishes. We both knew it was never about the dishes. It was because in that moment, I hadn't treated her like my partner. I treated her like someone who was disappointing me, that we eventually got through it. We talked. We cried. We apologized. But something that the therapist said in a session a few weeks later has never left me. She said, most couples don't fall apart because of the big moments. They erode because of the small ones, the ones they don't even notice they're having. That hit me like cold water, because I thought I was a good partner. I thought I communicated well. I thought because I wasn't doing the obvious, terrible things, I was doing fine. But I was doing this one specific thing almost every single day. And the research shows most people are. And if you're in a relationship right now, there's a very good chance you're doing it too. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because once you see it, you can stop it. And when you stop it, everything changes. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Now, I'm not a therapist. I want to be upfront about that I'm someone who almost lost a great relationship because I thought knowing about a problem was the same as not having it. And that humbling experience sent me down a rabbit hole. Books, studies, interviews, therapy sessions, trying to understand what actually separates couples who last from couples who don't. And what I found wasn't what I expected. Most of us have been sold a version of relationship advice that sounds wise but doesn't hold up. Communication is key. Never go to bed angry. Love is a choice. And look, there's truth in some of that. But none of it gets specific enough to actually help you at the moment. None of it tells you what to do when you're standing in the kitchen, exhausted, staring at a sink full of dishes, feeling that familiar heat rise in your chest. That's where the research comes in. And I mean actual research, not opinion, not anecdote, not a couples coach selling a weekend retreat. That I'm talking about the Harvard study of adult development. If you haven't heard of it, here's why it matters. It is the longest-running study on human happiness ever conducted. It began in 1938, tracked hundreds of participants across their entire adult lives, their health, their careers, their relationships, and it is still running today, now following the original participants' children and grandchildren. What the researchers found after decades of data reshaped how scientists understand human well-being. And the headline result wasn't about money or status or even physical health. That it was about the quality of people's close relationships. Robert Waldinger, the study's current director, put it plainly in one of the most watched TED Talks of all time. The people who flourished, who lived longer, stayed healthier, reported greater happiness, were not the ones who achieved the most. They were the ones who maintained warm, secure, low-conflict relationships, particularly with a partner. But here's the part that stopped me cold. It wasn't just the presence of love that predicted good outcomes. It was the absence of a specific kind of damage, a slow, grinding erosion that happened not in dramatic fights, but in thousands of tiny moments of disconnection. Moments where one partner reached out, emotionally, conversationally, even just with a look, and the other either dismissed it or turned away entirely. Researcher Shelley Gable at UCLA studied this same phenomenon from a different angle. She spent years examining how couples respond to each other's good news. Not the hard conversations, but the everyday ones. What she found was that how a partner responds in those ordinary, low-stakes moments is one of the strongest predictors of relationship satisfaction over time. In other words, it's not the big blow-ups that break relationships. It's the accumulation of small moments handled badly. And there's a name for the behavior sitting at the center of all of it. A behavior most couples engage in daily, often without realizing it. That's what we're going to break down right now. What is this behavior? What is the one thing that couples who stay together have quietly, consistently learned to stop doing? It's this. They stop making their partner feel like a problem to be managed. Not in the big, obvious ways. In the small, invisible ones. Every single day, in relationships all around the world, partners are doing something that feels completely natural, even justified, in the moment. They're reacting to the behavior instead of connecting with the person. And that distinction, as simple as it sounds, is the fault line that separates relationships that thrive from relationships that slowly go cold. Let me make this concrete, because abstract relationship advice is part of the reason most people stay stuck. There are 3 specific patterns that show up when we start treating our partner like a problem rather than a person. I call them the 3 invisible wedges. And I call them invisible because they don't look destructive from the outside. They look like normal conversation. They sound like reasonable behavior. But over time, they function like splinters, small, easy to ignore, and quietly infected. Wedge 1. Verdict language. This is when your words carry a judgment disguised as an observation. Phrases like, "you always do this," or "this is exactly what I mean," or that quiet, deadly, "I just don't understand how you." Notice what those phrases have in common. They're not describing a situation. They're delivering a sentence. They position your partner as someone with a pattern of failure, someone who keeps getting it wrong. And when a person feels like they're being assessed rather than heard, they don't open up. They defend. They shut down, or they attack back. The couples who last have learned to swap verdict language for observation language. Not, "you never make time for us," but, "I've been missing you lately and I want more of you." Same feeling, completely different landing. Wedge 2. Emotional checkout. This one is subtle enough that most people don't even catch themselves doing it. It's half listening. The phone that's technically down, but mentally still up. The MMHM, totally, while your eyes drift back to the screen. The Harvard research was clear on this. What erodes connection is not conflict. It's the accumulated experience of reaching out and finding nobody home. Every time your partner shares something, a worry, a win, a random thought, and you half engage, you're making a small withdrawal from an account that can only hold so much. The couples who stay don't give each other perfect attention every moment, but they have developed a habit of full presence in small doses, a few genuine minutes of real eye contact, real listening, real response. Those moments act like deposits that keep the account solvent even on the hard days. Wedge 3. The scoreboard. This is the one nobody wants to admit to, but almost everyone does it. It's the mental tally. I cooked 3 nights this week. I planned the last 2 vacations. I was the one who reached out after the last argument. The scoreboard runs quietly in the background, and most of the time it never gets spoken aloud. But it shapes everything. Your tone, your generosity, your willingness to give the benefit of the doubt. When you're keeping score, you stop leading with love and start leading with arithmetic. And love cannot survive arithmetic. Lasting couples, the ones who genuinely seem at ease with each other decades in, aren't keeping score. They've built what researchers call an economy of generosity. They give not because it's their turn, but because the relationship itself is something they've chosen to invest in. The return isn't keeping things even. The return is a partnership that actually feels like 1.3 wedges. Verdict language, emotional checkout, and the scoreboard. You don't have to be doing all 3 to feel the damage. One is enough. And the first step, always, is simply learning to see it, but seeing it isn't enough on its own. Because here's where most relationship advice completely loses the plot. Here's where I'm going to say something that might make you uncomfortable. Most relationship advice, the kind that fills bestseller lists and gets shared thousands of times on social media, is quietly making your relationship worse. Not because it's malicious, because it's incomplete. And incomplete advice, applied with confidence, can do real damage. Let me give you the biggest example. Good relationships require constant work. You've heard this. You probably said it. It sounds mature. It sounds honest. It signals that you take love seriously and you're not naive enough to think it's all effortless romance. But here's the problem. If you walk into your relationship every day believing it is fundamentally work, your nervous system will treat it like work. And no one sustains genuine warmth and generosity toward something that feels like a job they can't quit. The couples who last longest don't describe their relationship primarily as work. They describe it as a place they want to be. The effort they put in doesn't feel like labor. It feels like tending something they actually value. There's a difference between working on a relationship and working against its decay. One comes from love. The other comes from fear. And fear is an exhausting long-term strategy. Here's another one. You need to communicate more. Again, sounds right. Feels right. But the research tells a more complicated story. Couples in distress often communicate constantly. They talk about the problems, they circle the same arguments, they check in and debrief and process endlessly. What they're missing isn't more communication. It's safer communication. Communication where both people believe they won't be judged, dismissed, or turned into the villain of the story. More words into an unsafe container doesn't fix anything. It just generates more evidence for the scoreboard. And perhaps the most dangerous piece of advice of all, never let the spark die. This one sets couples up for silent, private shame. Because the spark, that early stage intensity, that neurochemical flood of new love, is biologically designed to fade. It always does. Everyone, neuroscientists studying long-term attachment have shown that the brain literally cannot sustain that level of dopamine response to the same stimulus indefinitely. It's not a sign something is wrong. It is what growing up together actually looks like. Couples who pursue the spark above everything else spend their lives chasing a feeling and quietly resenting their partner for not producing it. Couples who last have replaced the spark with something more durable, a deep, practiced sense of being chosen. Not the butterflies, the certainty, the knowledge that this person sees you fully, the ordinary, unglamorous, Tuesday night version of you, and stays anyway. That shift from chasing a feeling to building a foundation is where everything changes, and it starts with one specific technique most people have never been taught. That I want to give you something practical. Something you can actually use tonight, not after a weekend retreat or 6 months of therapy. Something that takes about 60 seconds and quietly rewires the way you and your partner experience each other over time. I call it the pivot question. Here's how it works. The next time you feel that familiar tension rising, the sigh building in your chest, the verdict forming in your mind, the scoreboard updating in the background, before you respond, you ask yourself one question. Not out loud, just internally, silently, before you open your mouth. The question is this: what does my partner need me to understand right now? Not what they're doing wrong. Not how do I make my point. Not how do I stay calm enough to win this cleanly. What do they need me to understand? That single shift in internal framing changes everything that comes out of you next. Because your tone, your word choice, your body language, none of it is consciously controlled in a heated moment. It all flows from whatever question your brain is secretly trying to answer. Change the question, and you change the output automatically. When you're asking how to make my point, you lean forward. Your voice gets sharper. You start building a case. When you're asking what they need me to understand, you get quiet. You make eye contact. You listen for the thing underneath the words. And here's what most people don't realize. Your partner can feel the difference before you say a single word. Now let me make this even more concrete with a second layer. Once you've asked yourself the pivot question and genuinely listened, not performed listening, actually listened, you follow it with what I call the reflect and reach. 2 steps, 10 seconds. Reflect means you say back what you heard, not to agree with it, just to show it landed. It sounds like you've been feeling unseen lately, and tonight just brought that to the surface. That's it. You're not conceding the argument. You're not abandoning your perspective. Simply proving that a real person, not a defensive wall. Receive what they said. Reach means you close the physical or emotional distance by 1 degree. A hand on the arm, turning your body toward them, dropping the folded arms. Something that signals, non-verbally, instinctively, I'm still here. I'm still on your side. That's the whole technique. A question, a reflection, a reach.it sounds almost embarrassingly simple. But simplicity is the point. Because in the moments that matter most, when you're tired, triggered, and convinced you're right, you don't have access to complicated frameworks. You need one question you can actually remember. What does my partner need me to understand right now? Ask it once a day and watch what starts to shift. Here's what I want you to do right now. Not tomorrow. Not after the next argument. Right now. Think about one moment this week, just one, where you reacted to your partner's behavior instead of connecting with a person. Maybe it was a sigh. Maybe it was a dismissive fine. Maybe it was the phone that stayed in your hand a little too long while they were talking. Just identify it. Name it quietly to yourself. Because awareness is always the first move. Then tonight, or the next time you're with your partner, try the pivot question once. Just once. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to make it a whole conversation. Just let it change one moment. See what happens. Small moves, made consistently, are what actually build lasting relationships. Not grand gestures. Not perfect communication. Just the daily, quiet decision to treat your partner like someone you're still choosing. That's the whole thing. Now, if this resonated with you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of the 3 invisible wedges do you recognize most in yourself? Verdict language, emotional checkout, or the scoreboard? No judgment. This is a space for honest conversation, not performance. And if you know someone in a relationship that matters to them, a friend, a sibling, someone quietly struggling, share this with them. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for the people we love is hand them the right words at the right time. If you want more content like this, practical, research-grounded, honest conversations about the things that actually shape our lives, subscribe and come back. There's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one. Disclaimer. The content shared in this video is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It is based on personal experience and publicly available research and does not constitute professional psychological, therapeutic, or medical advice. Every relationship is unique, and what works for one couple may not be appropriate for another. If you or your partner are experiencing serious relationship difficulties, emotional distress, or mental health challenges, please seek the support of a licensed therapist or qualified mental health professional.